Hey guys, it's Macy and welcome to a special video which will be about how to set up a GT3 car in this game. So without further ado, let's start. We're gonna pick some GT3 car. I really like the roof because I did a setup which works very well on this car, but I'm going to choose I don't know, okay, I'm going to choose my car from season 3, which is the Audi, and I'm gonna show you how to set up the GT3 car. Bear in mind that this is just my personal view of how to set up a car in this game. So far it worked on the roof, and also with the testing of the Audi I found out that my proceedings, or not proceedings, but the way that I set up the car works also for majority of the cars in the game, maybe just not for the F1 cars. So we are going to make a new setup, and the first screen we can see is the tires. The tire compound, I think I don't have to I'm going to reset this one. Yeah, there you go, rain. I'm thinking that the tire compound, I don't have to explain it. For rain you use rain tires, for wet, for dry you will use slick, and it depends if you want to use soft, medium or hard compound. Basically the softer the compound, the more grip you have and the more tire wear you have, so you have to count with that. Tire pressures, this is quite difficult to set up right in the real world, but in this game I found out that or in the real world and also in this game, the tire pressures is closely connected with the tire temperatures. So basically if the tire temperatures go up, then the tire pressures goes up as well. So and in racing conditions you have to have, or you want to have, as little tire pressure as possible, because the less tire pressure the more grip you have in the real world. But if you have no pressure in the tires, that's not going to work. But in the range of this, which is the range of this tire pressure is 150 bars to 250, so 1 bar, it's a 1 atmosphere. So basically if you want to have more grip, then you have to go all the way to the left, but you have to adjust this according to the track. For example, if you set the pressures like this, which you can, then go out on the track and you're going to set like 5 laps, because you need not just 1 lap but maybe 5 laps to get the tires up to temperature and in the racing conditions. And if some tires are going to overheat or are going to have more than 100 degrees Celsius temperature on them, then you just went into the pits and increase the tire pressures on the tires which are overheating. So if I going to say an example, if you are racing on Hockenheim, which has a lot of right hand turns, then you are very likely to overheat the left hand side tire, so the left front and left rear tire. So basically if this is the scenario that we had 1.5 bars on all tires, and you go and do 5 laps, and the left tires are going to have 120 degrees and the right tires will have like 95, then you just go, I don't know, maybe to 180 bars, and also to the rear 180 bars. Then you save it, go on the track as well, and then do again 5 laps and see if the tire pressure, if the tire temperatures is down or not. On this patch, which is 9.6, it looks like that the tire pressure and tire temperature are not as connected as usual, because I did some testing in the wet in the Audi and I put tire pressures to max because I had overheated. I was overheating my rear tires, so I put this setup on, went on the some 5 laps, and you know, 3 laps later my rear tires were in the same tire temperature as they were when I had like 1.5 bars. So it's down to the driving style as well, how hard you drive your car. So it's very difficult to set up right, but basically if you're going to use this guide, then you should be able to at least you know, make the tire pressures correct. Then the brake balance and brake pressures, these are quite you know, good factors how you can improve your braking stability, because when you set your braking pressure to maximum, then you will likely to lock your or all of your wheels. So if you do that, then simply put the pressure down a bit. I recommend starting with the 90 on all cars, and then you go also for some runs, and you will see if you're braking, if you're locking or not locking. If you're not locking and you think that you can brake much you know, shorter, then you go up for some percentage, but it's very up to you how you can modulate the brake pedal. The more important is the brake balance. This is different for each car, but basically if we say that we will have 50%, that means that when you apply the brakes, 50% of the braking power goes to the front wheels and 50% to the rear wheels. Basically if you hit the brakes, the front of the car dips down, and the more weight from the back of the car is transferred to the front tires. So usually we'll see like Formula 1 cars have a lot of brake balance to the front, but on these cars we don't have as much good brakes as F1 cars. But you can try to start with like 55 and then go on a track, see how the car is behaving. If you hit the brakes and the car start to lock the rear wheels, then you have to go to the front with the brake balance. If it is the other way round, so you hit the brake, you lock up the front, you have to go a little bit back with it. Simple as that. Or maybe you have to modulate your brake pedal much carefully. Brake ducts, this is quite simple. In league race we don't use the mechanical damage, but it still has a great effect because if you have closed brake ducts, so no air goes to the brakes, and resulting the brakes are getting hotter and hotter, and if your brakes are hotter than 700 degrees, in my opinion, or in my testing, when it went over 750, the car or the brakes were sluggish and the car behaved itself quite you know, twitchy, and it wasn't stable. So I like my brakes to be under 700 degrees. So according to that, do some laps and see what's with the brake temperatures and adjust this accordingly. Basically you will be safe with 30% on most of the tracks. The next is aerodynamics, and on the GT3 car the aerodynamics on this game isn't as you know, as effective as it I think is in real world. Basically in front you have just a splitter which has 2 settings, or 3, 0, 1 and 2. Basically you want as slow downforce as possible, or as minimum downforce as possible, and also because the more downforce you put on the car, the more drag you have and the less you get the top speed. What I found out that if you have really downforce demanding track like Catalonia, I was trying to run with the highest aero and the car was just slow on the straights. You know, I was just sitting back there. So basically the best starting point on this car, which is the roof, or no, it's Audi, sorry, it's Audi. I found out that on Nürburgring the sweet spot is like on the wet. inputs like 0 and 4.5, but I believe that in the drive it will be this one. I believe that this is going to be my starting point for every track on the drive. And again, it's down to your preference. If you feel that you need some front end grip, then put front downforce, but really the front splitter has a lot of effect to your drag and top speed, so be careful about that. The next we have alignment, steering ratio. This is a simple one. If you want to turn more sharply into the corners, you want to set it as fast, because the input that you have on your wheel is then quite fast in the game, and if you want your input to be smoother, then you go slow. It's basically simple as that. Then the left caster, right caster, you cannot touch these, and I basically don't know what these are and what they are doing, so I don't touch them even in the roof. And then the camber angles. On this game I found out that the camber doesn't have any effect on the car, apart from that if you have more than 0, like this, if you have more than 0, you're gonna have more tire wear. So basically start with that. In the real world, if you have negative camber angle, you have more grip in the corners, but not in this game, or maybe I just didn't notice any difference. So this is my personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. You can comment down below if you find out that it's working somehow and your lap times are improving. Front toe angle and rear toe angle, basically you can leave it like that, because it has also not much of a difference, but I start every time on both 0. So this is my starting point for every track, and usually I don't move these, but when I race in the wet, I put the rear toe in angle to 0.5 degrees, because it makes or I think, and it says that on the setup forums and setup guides that I read, that if you have rear toe in angle in positive side, then the rear of the car is more stable under acceleration. So you can take it as this. Then we have suspension. The ride height is basically how low the car is to the actual surface of the track. So basically, in a theoretical point of view, you have to have your car as low as possible to the track, because the overall downforce, which is created by the diffuser under the car, is greater if you have the car lower to the ground. So basically this is my starting point for every track. And if the track is bumpy and you are feeling that you know, your suspension is scratching, or you're scratching the bottom of the car, then maybe try to put 5 millimeters up the car, so the front and also the back. If you notice that if I set it to low, then we have the front ride height is lower than the rear ride height. This is done because if you have this setup, maybe I will increase this one for just a better view. If you have 5 millimeters difference, then you move your center of the downforce to the front. So basically, if you put it like this, the car has a rake effect, and you have more front end grip from this setup. So I recommend using this one, but in different cars it may be different. A roof has this as a... oh, this is the Audi, sorry. Audi has just 2 millimeters difference. The roof has 5 millimeters difference. It depends on the car, and if you want more grip, I recommend to upper the ride height on the back. Then we have spring rates. Basically, I didn't notice any or the just major difference there. But if you racing in the wet, you really want as soft as possible, because you want as much mechanical grip as possible on the car. So I believe this is quite good, but as it say here, the stiffer springs improve the vehicle's responsiveness. So basically, if you have very smooth track, you want to have quite stiff springs, but I recommend you to have soft rear springs, just to have better traction out of the corners. And the sway bars, I also recommend to start with the, or you can have it in the middle, because it has just 3 settings, as you can see. But in the wet, I recommend the softest, and maybe in the dry you can start with these ones, and then you can try, if the track is very smooth, then you can go with the stiff settings. If the track is bumpy, you can go with the lowest settings. The most tracks, they aren't as smooth as they look, so I recommend also the softest settings. The next page, we have a quite complex suspension settings all around. So here, bump stop. I really don't understand what they means, but when I start racing here at AOR with the GT3 cars, I put them to 0. But on Monza and on some tracks where you have high bumps, I just put it to 20 or to default settings, and I don't touch them because I don't see any difference. Maybe I'm wrong again, but I think that if you have some 20 millimeters there, they are preventing the car from bottoming out due to the lower ride height, as it says in the description. So leave it as it is, as default. But now we have the bump stops. No, sorry, the bump stops. Slow bumps, fast bumps. Then we have slow rebound and fast rebound. How to explain this? Slow bump and slow rebound is basically when the geometry and the suspension reacts to your driving inputs. So basically, if you turn the car to the left or to the right, or you're accelerating or you're braking, this is done by the slow bumps, fast bumps, and slow bumps and slow rebounds. Everything which you say slow is just when you turn and the car slowly goes into the corner. The fast bumps and fast rebounds is done by the roughness of the track, by the bumps and by the curbs. So, for example, the roof is very horrible on the curbs. So what I do, if the car is horrible on the bumps, I basically put the slow bump to softest, because also I want the car to have as much grip as possible in the slow speed corners, and when I turn in and when I accelerating out of the corners. Fast bump, I put it on maximum, because this is the force. This is the force that makes the suspension returns to its original state, I believe. Or maybe sorry, this is the force which interacts with the curb. So if the tires hits the curb, then the suspension pushes in the opposite direction to the curb. So basically the tire is staying in contact with the curb and not flying, in the air. So, or at least this is what I understand how it should work. So I put fast bumps on maximum, and then slow rebound I also put to the softest settings. Again, slow rebounds, and then fast rebound. This is the force how the tire is pushed back to its original state. So imagine when I hit the curb with my front tire, the tire or the suspension is compressed when I go over the curb, and then when I go over the curb, the tire and the suspension pushes to the tire to the its original state, so I want my car to have as much contact with the road as it possibly can, or otherwise you will lose the grip. So this is why I put also the fast rebound on the stiff side of a matter. And this is basically, did I set it right? Fast rebound, fast rebound, fast rebound, fast rebound. So this is basically my damper settings. In every car I use this, on every car I use it on the roof, I use it on the Audi as well, and it is noticeable difference. Then the next page we have differential settings, which is I think the most important thing here on the game, which I discovered, because when I change differentials, the car then feels completely different, and you can ruin the car or you can improve the car as much as that you will love it. Basically, I wanted to have the Audi last season, but I didn't know as much about the setup, the differential, or the setup overall as I know now. And I found out that if you have twitchy car under braking, you need to have you need to increase your limited slip deceleration lock to 90 degrees or maybe 100 degrees. This makes the car brake in the straight line. Yes, it's not improve, but the opposite word of improve. So it hinders, or why it is set here, right? As the settings made the car more stable, but limit the car's ability to turn. So basically, if you have 1%, then you hit the brakes, the car will slow down in a straight line, and if you try to turn according to this, the turning ability is not as good as, for example, with the default settings, which was 40 or maybe 50, I believe. But I think that braking in a straight line and a little bit understeered in the braking zones is better for my style of driving than snap oversteer, as I will get with the default settings. So I recommend to run 90%. And then the limited slip acceleration lock. This makes quite a huge impact on the car when you accelerating out of the corners, because with the default settings, when you turn your car around the corner and then you start to applying throttle much, starting to accelerate, on this car, on the Audi, I found out that the rear tires are going to spin a lot and overheat the tires, and you will slide from every single corner. Not in the roof, because it has the engine at the back, so I didn't have that problem in the roof, but in the Audi it was quite severe there. So I didn't like the car just because of this one thing, and I didn't know how to improve the car. But now I put the limited slip acceleration lock to 0. This makes the car quite stable, or very stable, out of the corners. But it says here that high settings here give the car better traction coming out of the corners. So basically the brain tells me that when I want as much traction as I can, I will put acceleration lock to 100%, but I think this is wrong. Or maybe it is because when you have drift cars and you're drifting and your back end is hanging to the side, you want to have as much grip on the rear tires as you can. So a lot of drift cars have 90% LSDs or limited slip differentials there, because they want both wheels, both right and left wheels spinning in the same same velocity. But here in race car you basically need any, or maybe I recommend started with 10%, and if you still feel some, you know, sliding out of the corners, and the back ends wants to slip away from you, then put it to 0. This is my setup for the Audi, and it feels quite stable even in the wet. You can control it. Limited slip preload. This is a thing where I noticed it in the roof last season, because when there are long corners where there is a part of a corner where you don't apply any brake or any throttle, then the limited slip preloads the wheels or the differentials, and it makes the car to turn in more into the corners. I found out. This is my personal view. If I had 0, then the car wanted to understeer, and when I apply the throttle, then the car starts to oversteer. So I put like 40 in my roof, but this Audi has 60 as a default, so maybe start with that. And in the wet I put 0 there, because really you don't need a lot of understeer there, or you don't need oversteer a car in the mid corner. So it's better to have understeer a car for myself or for my kind of driving in the wet, because when I go off the throttle and the cars get into the snap oversteer, that's very difficult to control it in the wet. In a drive, yes, because there are no much corners where you go, you know, without the throttle or without a little bit of throttle. So I recommend leave it to as default, and in the wet try to lower it, but it's again for your personal, you know, preference. Viscous lock, I don't see what this is going to do. It says more dynamic from differential lock. A high setting here makes the clutch more resistant. It makes some you know, clutch thing. I don't understand this one. I didn't have it on the roof, so I didn't mess with it in the Audi. Then the radiator in league race closed. That's no question, because you can't destroy your engine in the league race when we have mechanical damage turn off. So used closed radiator. Yes, the water temperature is going to be very high, but it doesn't matter. You will not lose any horsepower or any power to your engine, so leave it closed. But if you're racing in an open lobby and you and the mechanical damage is on, then it's the same as with the tires or with the brakes. You have to run some practice laps, see your temperatures, and also and if the oil temperature and water temperature are above 100 degrees, then you have to increase your radiator. But if you have open radiator, then you have less top speed. Simple as that. So in league race you need as much top speed as possible, and also acceleration, so leave it closed. Then we have a gearing. This is pretty simple one. If you are on the track which has less straight or very short straights, then go with these. Don't really touch these ones, because you can see that if we have first gear and it says 6.65 and you want your second gear a bit shorter, then you are in the same area as the first gear, so it makes no point on this game these first to sixth. On the roof I had this one, basically that I had some room that I can longer the sixth gear, but I didn't have this slider in the roof. So, and now I can see that you have just two choices: acceleration, which is 5.14, or top speed. So basically it's your choice. Monza, it's here. Donington Park or Nürburgring, on some tracks with not as long straights, you go for acceleration. That's simple as that. Fuel, this is not what I have to explain. Just put the fuel load to race, which you need to have. So it's basically 100 liters pretty much for 30 laps and qualifying fuel. This is quite interesting because last season I found out that when I was driving the roof and I put just 15 liters of fuel, the car was twitchy. It felt light, yes, but it didn't felt faster. So I was running with like 50 liters of fuel on my qualifying lap, and the car was much better with that. So who knows? But in the says that in the real world you want to have as low fuel as possible to finish the race, or for qualifying, but also for finishing the race. Then brake mapping. This is basically an engine braking. I believe that if you want your engine to put some throttle under braking while downshifting to prevent locking your rear tires, then you want to have it higher. But I think that I don't want anything of that. Also, when you have it on higher, I think it increases your consumption. I'm not sure. We can more fuel allows your car to run for that's fuel low. Sorry, brake mapping. Yeah, it has a negative effect on fuel mileage. So if it's higher, then you have higher consumption. And the restrictor, that's the just balancing the car over the other classes of the GT cars. Basically, you want to have as much. I think this is the much lower settings here. Decrease, yeah. So you leave it like maximum. That's all. So that's all, guys. I hope you understand what I was trying to say to you. I hope you will try my setup, or you take some advice from me. And if you are not sure, you can comment down below, or you can ask me. I usually share my setups. So and also I want to know if this setup or this advice will help you in your racing. So see you soon and take care.